All right, you guys ready? All right. We'll call to order the Maplewood City Council Manager Workshop for Monday, January 14th. Happy to be here and happy to have so many friends joining us. Must be a hot topic today.
Oh, please.
Before we get into the discussion this evening, we do have some business to take care of swearing in two of our council members. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Sint.
I, Kathleen Juneman, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and of the state of Minnesota, and faithfully discharge the duties of council member in the city of Maplewood, in the county of Ramsey, and the state of Minnesota, to the best of my judgment and ability. So help me God.
Thank you, I think.
Congratulations, and thank you for still being here. With that, Ms. Sint, may I ask for a roll call, please?
Councilmember Juneman?
Here.
Councilmember Abrams? Acting Mayor Smith?
Here. Thank you. Today we have one piece of business on the agenda, which is to discuss the filling of our council vacancies. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Second.
Moved by Abrams, seconded by Juneman. Any discussion on the agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Hearing ayes all, agenda is passed. With that, we will get into our discussion for the workshop. Here's my proposal for the discussion kind of format, and I am happy to take input on that proposal if anybody feels that they have some. What I propose we discuss is first, Mr. Beatty will give us an overview of the state law governing appointments to make sure that we're all very clear on what we are and are not able to do and what things will look like going forward. Then I'd recommend we talk through sort of the next steps and the order of those steps when it comes to our process for appointing the mayor and the council vacancies. That being sort of a more process-driven discussion. And then go into a bit deeper discussion on our process for mayor, to talk through some of the specifics on what rules may be governing that and some of the details on how those rules may be applied or potentially suspended. And then to talk kind of through what do we think we need from a council member that's different from, or need from a mayor that's different from a council member. And then to talk through a process for what we might consider during the meeting today. Does that sound like a good process to everybody?
Works for me.
And I'd also like to recommend, because of the nature of this discussion and such, that we take a slightly more informal approach to our workshop than normal. I think that this is a discussion where we need to ideally find alignment between the three of us and So I'm happy to do the lights thing and everything, but I don't feel strongly I need to call on you and things like that. So I would propose that we just do this a little bit more naturally as a discussion today, if everybody's okay with that. Wonderful. So with that, Mr. Beatty, would you be so kind as to school us in the ways of appointments?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Council. In your packet is a memorandum that I wrote several weeks ago that outlines sort of the basics that we're talking about, but I'll go through some of that again tonight so everyone's up to speed on that. It's not unusual for a council to lose a member and have to replace a member. What is unusual, in fact, I think it's the first time I've seen it in the 35 years that I've been a city attorney, is having to replace two people at the same time. And that is a challenge because of the reduced number of people left. And it just makes the dynamic a little bit different. But nonetheless, here we are. The rules about appointing folks to the council is that there really are no rules. The council can appoint anyone to a vacancy in the seat so long as that person is eligible to hold the office. We're going to talk about some of this stuff at the work session, and then when we get to the regular meeting, there will be certain actions that will be taken. You will see that on your agenda for the regular meeting, there are a couple of resolutions, in each case declaring or accepting the resignation of Councilmember Zhang and then Mayor Slawick, and recognizing or declaring that those resignations have produced vacancies. Those are necessary resolutions to establish the fact that there are two slots that have to be filled. After that, again, the rules are whatever the council wants to implement, so long as the person appointed is eligible to hold the office. You can make appointments this evening. You can go through a process. You can handle the appointment of mayor differently than the appointment of council. It's really whatever you want. The general rules are that an appointment needs to be made. The statute says that the vacancy shall be filled by appointment. The rule with regard to how long that vacancy or that appointment lasts depends on the length of the unexpired term. In the case of Councilmember Zhang's term, there is less than 2 years left in his term, and therefore whomever you appoint to that spot can be in place until the next regular city election, which will be November of 2020. Just as he would have been up for re-election at that point, that slot will be filled. So basically, you would be filling that slot for the remainder of the term. That's different than the situation with the mayor, since Mayor Slawick was just elected to a full 4-year term. Obviously, there's more than 2 years of her unexpired term. And so any appointment that you make for that will be until a special election can be held, and that can be held at any time no later than the next general election, which again will be November of 2020. If you wish to have a special election prior to that, then it would be necessary to adopt an ordinance to establish a special election some other time. What you did in November was eliminate or repeal an old ordinance that established a different rule, and what you've adopted is now the most common procedure for statutory cities, which is simply to appoint until the next till a special election can be held at the same time as the next general election. One of the things that you will have to talk about is the sequence of that appointment, whether the mayor should be first or council member or done simultaneously. Again, that's up to the council. There's no limitation on who can be appointed mayor. It does not have to be a current member of the council, although that is generally the case. if someone from the councils, in other words, our current council member is appointed mayor, that's permissible, but that person cannot vote for himself or herself. There's a statutory prohibition against that. One of the other rules is that the mayor, or in this case, the acting mayor, can break a tie. You know, in most contexts, the mayor is simply first among equals in a statutory city, and then other than having a few ceremonial duties, doesn't really have any power above and beyond what's exercised by other council members. But this is a rare example, or a rare exception, that in the case of a tie, the mayor can break the tie and is not restricted to picking between the two people who tied. He or she can pick anyone, again, so long as they're qualified for office, and they cannot appoint themselves to office. So those are the general rules, and what I would suggest is that you have a discussion and see if you can reach some consensus as to the order and how you want to go about this. I'm certainly available to answer any questions about this. You know, when we talk about the rules, as the acting mayor has said, I think that it's makes sense to be flexible with regard to the rules. This is Robert's Rules of Order. I turn it this way so you can see what it is, an inch and a quarter thick. Maplewood, like most cities, has adopted Robert's rules. These are rules that were designed for large assemblies. They're not particularly useful with regard to smaller groups like this, even under normal circumstances. And so what I would, my point would be that the rules ought to help us make a decision, not impede the council from making a decision. And with that, I will rest and answer questions as they come up.
Thank you, Mr. Beatty. Real quick, just for those of us who are not lawyers learned in this sort of work, is this the same or very similar process to what Senator Tina Smith just went through in filling that senatorial vacancy at the state level?
Well, the rules are different. I'm not exactly sure what limitations were placed on her appointment. What I described is specific for statutory cities, which is what we have to live with.
But it's similar in nature.
Yes, well, it's similar in terms of there needs to be an appointment. It's for, in this case, she has to stand again for election in 2 years. And so, yeah, there's certainly some similarities.
Great, thank you. Any comments or questions on what Mr. Beatty had to say? It's pretty straightforward, I think. Unfortunately, it doesn't give us a tremendous amount of guidance.
No.
But it at least puts out the rules of the road. So I would propose, as a group, we talk a little bit about sort of how we see our process going forward. If you guys have some thoughts on, I bet we do, what we think that process might be, I would entertain that we move on to that discussion.
I think we should select mayor first. I think it's important to have a chair in place. And as Mr. Beatty said, it's normally done from the seated council, and I would agree with that, albeit I am not interested.
I'll make a note.
But I think we need to stay on course with the framework, and that includes having a chair that moves with us as we go forward now. And then we talk about a process for selecting council. That's my opinion anyway.
I would agree with Councilmember Juniman. I think that it is important for purposes of stability, that we make the determination that of the appointment of the mayor. And unlike Councilmember Juniman, I am interested.
And I would also concur, I think the more speedily we can have the mayor question answered, I think the better it will be going forward. So I think that is something that we can, here shortly, spend a little time discussing the details of that process that we'll take tonight. I too am interested.
Aren't we
And
glad I'm not?
yeah. So I think we'll talk through kind of what that might look like. And I do have confidence we'll be able to have a good discussion about this tonight and come out with a decision that we're all comfortable with and move on together. I think it's, I'm very confident that the motivations of this entire council have always been for the best interest of the city, and I think we go with that in mind. How about council? So assuming that someone, one of the two of us, is appointed, that would open 2 council positions. Any thoughts on a process around that?
I actually think we should define a period of time when people can apply. It has to be a rather short window, I think, because we need to get down to business with a full complement. So short window being, in my mind, 2 to 3 weeks. And then I don't think we should, depending on the number that apply, but I don't think we should be interviewing the entire world. So it was my thought, as I've been thinking this through, whether we ask Mr. Beatty if there's someone in his office, because I know they do a lot of municipal work, or someone at the League of Minnesota Cities to go through the applications to sift out those that are most appropriate is I guess the word I want, meaning background, service in the city, other types of service outside of this, that type of thing. I just think somebody outside this organization needs to look at them. Since, first of all, there's only 3 of us, and that really shouldn't be up to us. It's the final winnowing down by doing the interviewing. And I don't think we should put it on staff. That's just not something that I'm willing to do. Simply, not that I don't think they're not capable, but I just don't think it's a good idea. I think an outside organization that does a lot with municipal government should be the ones to help us get to the meat of what we have to offer. So that's my opinion.
Mr. Beatty, can I ask a question? Would that be possible to have someone from your office go through the applications to determine whether or not people are qualified or meet the minimum qualifications? Is that something that's possible?
Well, yes to that limited question. I've never been asked to do this before. I would not be comfortable trying to make a recommendation
No,
to you
no, no,
as
no,
to
no.
who would be a good appointment.
No,
I think
no,
that's
no.
completely up to you, but certainly we could take a look at to see if the relatively rudimentary requirements for being appointed, age, citizenship, residency, and so forth, are met. I could certainly do that. I don't know if that's going to eliminate anybody, so it's probably not going to do a whole lot of work for you. The tough part will be then selecting from among what might be multiple people who qualify.
I'm wondering if we might be able to handle this in a similar fashion that we do with, when we talk through charitable gambling, where if we were to, as council members, get the applications that were
There's only
over
3
that
of us, though.
hump,
There's
and
only
then-
3 of us, though.
what's that?
With only 3 of us, I don't know how. But you're deciding. I
Right.
know, but, okay.
To-
I have one other question that maybe he has to answer that would flow into this. if I can.
Okay, so, but my thought was, could we, sort of each individually score them out and then say, we'll take the top 5 or top, top some number?
Are we allowed to put any other question on our application other than what's here?
Yes, that was just meant to kind of get you
Because
started.
I really think maybe we should discuss that too at some point, something more specific, I guess, to the job.
Yeah, I mean, again, the process is completely up to you.
Okay.
There are, yeah.
I think from my perspective, I think it's important that we have a process. I know a number of individuals have indicated that they are interested in serving in this capacity, and I think to the extent that we can come up with a process, I like the idea of someone outside of staff at least looking at it and determining, do they meet the minimum qualifications, not evaluating them or making any recommendations, but just make sure that the people that we're looking at actually meet the minimum requirements. And then I think maybe the next step, maybe for us to talk about, is what does that process actually look like? I mean, right now, we don't know. I know that there are a number of people that have expressed interest. And so I would expect that we would get a number of applicants. I would like to see a little bit more of an application form, and maybe even including asking people to submit a resume if they would feel comfortable with that, so that we have additional information. I know sometimes I always think we fall short when we are interviewing for commissions. We basically talk about whether or not people, can attend the meetings. I think that's too perfunctory. This is really an important thing that we're charged with, and I want to make sure that we really get the very best candidates to sit up here at the DS with us, because this is really an important job. So I think maybe spending a little bit of time, any other suggestions about how do we go through, let's say that we get a dozen applications. How do we then, once we go through, are they, of age, are they residents of our city? I mean, those are kind of the basics. What are then some ways that we can review those applications, I should say?
Thanks. And I think like the questions that are there now are pretty broad, if you will. If it were up to me, we'd also make them more specific than they already are. I mean, say, like number 4. Okay, really? I mean, I guess I would say why and support it. In other words, give a reason. And
So I agree. I think we can build out this form.
Yes.
I think that's relatively straightforward. I think this is a good start, but we can certainly build that out.
And
I
I think
think the
we-
question that Councilmember Abrams is asking, which I think is the more critical one, is once we have that form, then what? Is there a step before interviewing where we funnel that down? And if so, how do we take that step?
I guess that's why I was asking for someone else to look at them to see if the questions were actually answered, rather than
Yeah.
my opinion of whether they're answered. It's different for someone else reading what somebody wrote and saying, does that answer that question? Or my
But
reading it.
I'm hearing Ron say the only thing, or I'm sorry, Mr. Beatty, I'm hearing Mr. Beatty say that really the only thing that they can verify are those concrete things of residency, age, and citizenship, right? So that's, it's helpful. Those are things we should verify, but,
Well, I don't know, how
Go
about
ahead.
the answers to 4, 5, and 6?
Is there a process by which, I'm going back to what you suggested about charitable gambling, where we look at them and maybe pare it down from the number of applications that we get to something that is more manageable? Maybe do we want to interview 4 or 5? I mean, I don't know, I'm just throwing out numbers. But one of the things that seems to be missing here, I guess my look at this is that I want to find candidates for our council that have been actively involved in our community, but I also want to know, what do you think you can bring to this council? What do you think what are your goals for the city? What do you want to accomplish in the next 2 years?
And your skills?
Then I want to know what skills from what you've been doing up until now really qualify you or make you the best candidate to sit up here in the 2 vacant seats. Those are the things that really make a difference to me.
Yep.
That I would like to see focused on. But we need that do we need to plan on winnowing this down?
Yes.
From, let's say that there's 12 people, do we want to?
I was thinking of, we can expand it to 5, I suppose, but I was thinking of 4, because if you're running for office and there's a primary and you're this close to the desk, it's 4 people for 2 seats.
I'd say minimum of 4.
I think that's
For-
a good number. That seems to have some rationale, some basis, rather than just coming up with picking some number out of the air.
Do we want to say four hard stop?
interviewed.
Or 4 to 6, or what if we have 6 great candidates? Would we say no to 2?
Well, you got to do something.
I mean, would we say no?
Ultimately, only 2 are going to be picked.
Sure, but
I'm sticking with 4, but you do what you want.
I like 4 because it's rooted in the fact that that's what the election would look like.
sure. I'm comfortable with that.
And then we have to figure out based on what Ms. Abrams just said, how we word those questions. And I would also like to see number 4 a little less commission-like, I guess is the only way I can put it.
Yeah. And if we've already had the other questions vetted,
Yeah,
sort of is what it
Right.
is. Like, can you work it into your schedule?
yeah,
Like,
really.
Hopefully that's clear. Do we want, I'm not sure that sitting up here drafting questions is going to be the best use of our time.
I didn't
Yeah.
know, I don't know that
So
we should tonight, but whatever, we need
if
to
we
do
give
it
guidance to
rapidly,
staff to draft some
based on what she
questions,
said.
and then also make sure Mr. Beatty reviews them to ensure that they're fair and
Yes,
and,
legal and all those
non-discriminatory.
things.
I do think, like, for a resume, I would suggest that we give them the option of
Right.
putting
It's
a resume.
optional, right.
Yeah.
It's like our
Right.
commission
It just,
applications do.
it gives us further background, and some people might have them, some people might not.
Or if they just want to do a thing of work experience that isn't even a resume,
Right.
it's just work experience
Sure.
with explanation, it's fine.
Supporting documents of any kind. I just don't want it to be where if, there's someone who has a lot to offer, but they don't have a resume together. I don't want that to be a limiting factor. And I think I think it's very important that we ensure through Mr. Beatty's support and through all of our eyes that we're not inadvertently being discriminatory in any way. This should be a door that's open to any Maplewood resident over the age of
Absolutely.
21.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Can we maybe put something in here that, I think we're at the point, I know that we're getting, emails and communication from people in support of others. Can we skip that? I would appreciate not getting any more.
So
It
would
just
I.
seems,
So would I, because it smacks to me of campaign endorsements, and that isn't where we are.
I guess people are welcome to email me if they want
they can
to. I
email me,
just,
but I'm not gonna pay any
sure.
attention to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's, how you react to those emails is up to you guys, but I don't think we can stop people from emailing us.
right, but I'm
Yeah.
talking about as far as
Not going to solicit
the,
them on this form.
right, not soliciting things on this
Hmm.
form.
Unless it's part of your job experience that you want somebody to verify, that's different, but
Yeah, I sort of feel like.
It's just a thought.
Yeah.
Feels a little heavy-handed.
Well, as my college counselor in my high school used to say, she was very, very patrician, and she used to say, Brian, a thick application is rarely a strong application.
thank you
So-
for the wisdom.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we leave it up to how folks best want to present themselves, and then we get to have our thoughts on how that works,
How do you want to narrow this down after we get you questions and we have people apply? So we still need to establish a time frame
Yeah.
and how you're going to narrow down the applications to 4.
So do we do some sort of a
Spreadsheet?
spreadsheet scoring
Have
method
you
like we
rank
do?
'em.
Fine.
And then we have staff tally them up,
Report back.
report them up. And then
Okay.
if we have a tie, we'll have to, maybe if there's a tie, that's when we do 5 instead of 4 or something.
No more coin
We shoot
flipping.
for 4.
Do we think that 3 weeks is sufficient time for people, let's look at calendars maybe, is 3 weeks enough time for people to have the application, to get the application, and then,
That was more than I was thinking, so I think so. So our next meeting is the 28th,
That'll be 2 weeks.
and then our next meeting after that is the 11th.
if we had applications due by the 30th or 31st?
Well, I was actually wondering, would we want to do interviews on the 28th for our workshop?
I think that might be kind of quick.
I think that's
That's
too
too
crunched.
fast?
Because if we have to go through them and then have
rate 'em.
staff, I was just thinking if they were due the 30th or 30, I'm just throwing out dates, 30th or 31st, we could then do the applications at our first meeting, on the 11th.
the interviews?
The interviews, I'm sorry, the interviews
And
on
then
the
we could
11th.
And then we could vote in the meeting.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's a reasonable time.
So 211 would be interviews at workshop, and then we would vote at the meeting.
Appoint at the meeting.
Point at the
Or,
meeting,
I'm
yeah.
sorry, appoint.
So the applications are due by let's make them due by the 30th, and then staff, Mr. Beatty's office is going to make sure that they are, that they're qualified, they meet the minimum qualifications, and then if we would get them,
By the 4th?
by the 4th, is that too aggressive, Mr. Beatty?
No, I think that's fine.
So that we get them then on the 4th, and that'll give us our time, and then by Friday, staff can invite the 4 that are going to be the finalists.
Do we want to give them more notice than
I think we
the
could.
weekend?
If I could, Mayor.
Yeah, please.
I think we could put in the application materials, the schedule, and due dates, deadlines, that kind of thing, so everyone knows that interviews will be on the 11th, and so have to be prepared to be able to show up that night at 6 or 5:30 or whatever time we do our workshop.
What do we do if people are unavailable for interviews?
That's like saying you're unavailable for the election.
Gotcha, yeah. I just
Yeah.
Sorry.
asking the question.
Yeah.
Need to get available.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, I'm with you.
I'm going on vacation, so can I interview some other time? It's not going to be an appropriate response.
Yeah, fair enough,
Okay.
fair enough. All right.
All right, so.
Any unanswered questions on
Another
council process?
clarification, if
Yeah.
I might, Mayor. Staff will get you some questions for your review in the next day or two,
Yes.
and then we're already getting this template ready to go to put on the website as well, so people can download an application from the website or fill it out on the website and get it to us, or pick up a copy and mail it in, whatever. We'll give them options.
Good.
So could we commit to having this posted by Friday?
Yes,
Or-
absolutely.
Or before?
Yep.
Okay.
So if we have,
Can I ask Mr. Sharon if maybe we can get something, besides putting it on our website, in terms of some type of a press release? I know I've been watching, I think it was South St. Paul and St. Paul all had short little articles in the newspaper about taking applications for council members.
Yes, we could try to put a press release out. Definitely put a press release out there. Obviously, you put a press release, it's up to the media organization to decide whether or not they're going to run it, but I could contact at Lilly News and also the Pioneer Press and other news agencies that cover our area, of course.
It's been an interesting
Yeah.
election
they'll
year, and
cover
they
it.
I think
just
they'll
might
cover
take
it.
up on this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pioneer Press can list this as badly as they deliver my paper, I don't have much hope.
Your grievance is duly noted.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else on the council process?
When are what's the date for us to get them to do our little spreadsheet thing?
So we would get them on the 4th
Yeah, okay. And
And
we have
then
to have them back in by the,
by the, what do you think? 6th, 7th?
7th at the latest, I think.
okay. Thank you.
And then we would get notified on the 8th of who's getting invited? Mr. Beatty, does that sound reasonable?
Yes.
Ms. Coleman?
Yes.
And will the interviews be during the workshop? And
Workshop.
then the appointment will be during the council meeting? Okay.
Yep.
And we're able to get that onto the agenda and everything so that,
Yes, we have plenty of time for that.
okay.
Great. Any concerns about the council process? All right. So next, I'd like to talk through the mayoral appointment discussion. So for this one, I think we'll start back again with Mr. Beatty to talk a little bit about some of the specifics around this discussion, since we do have an interesting discussion ahead of us. Mr. Beatty.
Mr. Mayor, Council, yeah, this is going to be your first action, as I think several of you agreed that while it's not legally required, selection of the mayor makes the most sense. Several of you expressed the belief that the new mayor should come from one of the sitting council members. Again, not a legal requirement, but a pretty common requirement. The challenge that you've got, again, is you've got a very small electorate. There are only 3 people who are involved. And if you're going to select somebody from that council, then effectively you have to recognize one of the other rules, which is that you cannot vote for yourself. So it's going to limit the number of people who can vote. I guess, again, you can proceed however you want. People can nominate whomever they want. They can nominate as many people as they want. People can second their own nomination, although seconds are really not even necessary for that. You do a nomination to sort of get a name on the floor. What I guess I would suggest is that you work towards a process that confers legitimacy or appears legitimate, in the sense of having as many people vote as possible and getting as much of as participation as possible in the outcome. I think that's important for the council to come out of this process feeling like the person selected has some legitimacy. I think that's important for the staff. I think that's also important for the public to feel that.
Thank you, Mr. Beatty. So I have a question I'd like for us to discuss a bit, and I think my goal here, and I hope our goal, will be to talk about this not from the perspective of personalities or specific skill sets sitting up here right now, but to think through as council members to say, what is it that we feel we need from a mayor that's different than a council member? What does the city need out of this person from a leader perspective, and that is unique to the mayor role? And maybe that'll help us start to frame the discussion a bit and help to understand, as we do start talking about those that are interested, to give a bit of a yardstick there. Is that fair?
I guess.
I think from the perspective of the mayor and what's necessary for our city, it's someone that I think has to be accessible during the workday. I certainly am aware that Nora Slawick was very engaged in daily activities, different types of, anything from ribbon cutting to coming over to City Hall, meeting with residents. Certainly, I think more time is required of the mayor than is necessarily required of the council. I think that it has to be someone who obviously has the respect of the other council members, someone who is willing to do it. But, I mean, I think it certainly has to be someone, too, that has a vision for where they want to take the city. And, I mean, those are just a few of the thoughts that I have about it.
Am I next?
If you want.
Obviously, the ability to run a decent meeting. That reflects back on my past, but I'm saying we won't go there. Meaning keeping a meeting moving when necessary and keeping order when necessary and all those things. It sounds mundane, but it's very important. I think someone who, this is my, more my opinion, I guess, but someone who can divide their attention, if that's possible, between keeping the agenda moving and keeping some focus on the issues that are on the table. And I know that's difficult. It's one of the reasons I don't want it. I like to focus on my issues. Anyway, I do think it's difficult. I've watched many people do it, and it's very difficult to do them, and yet it's very necessary that somebody be able to do that. I think that it's a place where I see leadership as not needing to point out that you're the leader, if that makes any sense to you. It's just by how you take care of things. That's enough for now.
I think these are great things. I think, from my perspective, I think there's also a role for the mayor to sort of be a champion for Maplewood. And I think there's, to me, one of the biggest differences between a council member and the mayor is the mayor does sort of become the face for the council in a lot of situations.
Yep.
And so being able to work regionally with partners, work with other government agencies, and be someone who can sort of connect, tell our story, and draw those folks together to drive resources to Maplewood, I think is a critical piece. I think being able to, you have to be able to work well with staff, particularly with Ms. Coleman, and have a respectful, frank, and positive relationship. I think that's really important. But I think this idea of sort of being able to not only, I totally agree with Councilmember Abrams that having a vision for where the city should go, but then also being pretty single-minded, being able to share that vision and promote that vision internally within our government, within the city of Maplewood, and then to the broader community of potential developers, business partners, and employers, and future residents, and whatnot is also really critical. So I think that's also a piece that's important. But anything else you guys would add? Anything that maybe feels more important or less important? I mean, just to be very honest, this is a hard conversation to have when you're
Yes.
interested, right? Because you want to be unbiased, and you want to think about it from the perspective of the city, but also there's a part of me that wants to be shaping this in a way because I'm excited about the idea, right? So just to be very honest, this is a tough thing to think through to try to stay unbiased.
It's even more fun sitting over here.
I bet. And I will say, as we go through this process, I think it's really critical to remember that we are blessed with 3 people up here who are good people, and
We work hard.
and we work hard, and we care for the city, and I think we care for each other too. And so I really, I was sharing earlier, my goal is to get through this in a really positive way where we can all move ahead and move forward and move together, because we owe it to the city to do that.
I share in that as well, and I think that we can't forget the reason why we're in this position. It really is a wonderful position in that our mayor was promoted up, as it were, to be the chair of the Met Council. And I think what a great representative that's going to be for the east side, the whole metro east side. It's going to be fabulous to have a representative at the helm of the Met Council, and that Councilmember Tujang was elected to the House of Representatives. I mean, we're here because we've got very qualified, good people sitting up at this dais, and yeah, I share in it with you. I want this to be seamless. I want to be able to make good decisions for our city, and then let's move forward because there's an awful lot of things that we need to accomplish. And it can be really very exciting.
Absolutely. Anything you'd add to Ms. Coleman? We're good? Any other thoughts?
I flippantly thought about this over the weekend and went, too bad we can't do this like shared custody. You know, January,
Right, split
March,
it up.
May.
Well,
Make it a lot simpler.
so with that, I think that's a good transition then to sort of discuss how we want things to work during the meeting today.
I have a question for
Yeah.
Mr. Beatty. Can people self-nominate or not? I know they can't vote for themselves, but can they
Yes.
self-nominate?
Yes.
Okay, well, I
And,
guess I'll just sit here.
and just to be clear, whether we suspend the rules or not, you still can't vote for yourself.
That's correct.
No, but
Right.
I was asking about the nomination part.
Yeah, that's a statutory prohibition.
So if we do get to the point that we're voting, you know, it could be that, you know, we vote for each other. Yeah, the effect is the same.
Yes, it
But,
is.
But I do think that there is something that is good and right about it being a 2-to-1 vote versus a 1-to-0 vote. You know, there is, I think, you know, I mean, the reality is if I wasn't interested, I would happily vote for Mary Lee. So if I can't vote for myself, she's definitely my second choice. You know, and hopefully I'd be your second choice. But I mean, you know, there is,
I suppose we could do a write-in for me.
we could, just to really make
Don't you
it,
dare.
let's get her. So when we get to the meeting, we will be declaring the vacancy of the mayor and declaring the vacancy of the one council seat. At that point, if we wish to move ahead with a process for the mayor, I'm assuming we would start by making nominations.
Yes, that would be a good
I would
place.
propose we give us each a few minutes
We'll be
to,
doing that under this, after these appointments.
yeah. Then we would propose to, you know, give each of us a few minutes to say
Rah, rah.
something. I would say, if either of the other council members have questions, I think that's appropriate. And then we vote on the appointment, and then I would recommend we do the swearing in right there. Does that seem reasonable?
Since I'm not part of this.
Geez, guys, this is too easy. And then I think the other thing we'll need to do then is basically table the appointment for the council member pending the process that we've already
The previous
discussed.
process.
We'll have to declare the other vacancy
Yes.
then, and then there will be, we'll declare both vacancies on the
Right.
council.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
And my understanding from Mr. Beatty is as soon as you're sworn in as mayor, that is an effective resignation of your council seat as well. So then we would
Okay.
be able to recognize that vacancy at that time.
Yes, the acting mayor is correct. Actually, I've worked with the city clerk to, she's prepared
14 different resolutions.
a number of resolutions, sort of in her back pocket with blanks, because we don't know what the names are going to be. But yes, that's exactly right. If one of you comes off of the council bench and becomes mayor, then there is a vacancy, and you can either submit a written resignation, or by simply taking the oath of office as mayor, that acts as a resignation. And so one of the resolutions that the clerk has in their back pocket is the resignation or the declaring that there is a vacancy because one of you, fill in the blank, has become mayor, and then you would adopt that resolution, and that sets the table for then the process that you've discussed to fill both council seats.
It's like Mad Libs.
My head hurts.
Yeah,
He can lead us through it.
excellent. Well, I think we have our processes set. We've had a nice, quick discussion on sort of that process. We're a little bit early. Any other comments or thoughts on this? I appreciate you guys kind of rolling with the informal nature of this. I think
I
it's
like
a
that much
better way to
better.
have the discussion.
Yes.
So with that, I'd say, shall we adjourn and take a little time? All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. We are adjourned.